The topic of immigration reform has been heavily debated in the United States throughout the years. We, as a group, decided to place emphasis on Mexico because it is one of the top 10 countries that make up the majority of undocumented individuals within the United States.
The goal of our project is to spread awareness on the different aspects of this complex issue in hopes of providing a clear spectrum that will allow voters to better decide their stance on immigration reform. Important questions to ask ourselves when facing this dilemma is:
what is the history between Mexico and the United States? And what are the events that have impacted the amount of immigration and the status of these undocumented individuals?
What are the different regulations and laws taking place now that impact undocumented individuals, their families, and the community as a whole?
What are the common misconceptions surrounding undocumented people that allow individuals to formulate negative opinions about them?
What daily barriers and struggles do undocumented individuals and their families encounter here in the United States?
How is the country as a whole finding a solution to the issue of immigration reform, and what questions are still left unanswered?
Influences on Mexican migration to the United States. In 1848, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed between Mexico and the United States. Mexico lost about one-third of its territory, and the United States gained approximately 80,000 former Mexican citizens. During the 1850s, the California gold rush lured about 10,000 Mexicans with its riches. In the 1880s, the United States and Mexico began connecting their railroad systems. The Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 shifted the railroad labor source from the Chinese to Mexicans. The start of the First World War in 1914 left many industrious jobs to be filled. The Restriction Act of 1921 stipulated that entrance to the United States for immigrant racial groups would be limited to 3% of their current population within the United States. The United States Border Patrol was created in 1924 to protect the northern and southern borders from illegal immigrant crossings. The Great Depression of 1929 began what would become known as the Mexican repatriation. Throughout its duration, about 2 million people of Mexican descent were forced to return to Mexico, of which more than half were U.S. citizens. The Dust Bowl of the 1930s caused many to relocate to California. They had to find work in the fields where mostly Mexicans and Filipinos worked. In 1933, the Immigration and Naturalization Service Agency was established in order to help regulate immigrants to the United States. The Second World War began in 1939, leaving the United States government to find a solution to all the agricultural labor demanding attention. In 1942, the Emergency Farm Labor Agreement was signed between the United States and Mexico. This agreement, later known as the Bracero Program, stipulated that Mexico would provide farm workers to the United States that would eventually return to Mexico. In 1954, Operation Wetback was established. Throughout its duration, nearly 1 million people were apprehended. By the time the Bracero program ended in 1964, 5 million contracts had been issued. In 1965, the Hart-Celler immigration reform set the limit for the number of visas that would go to Latin Americans at 120,000. The first unit for the Border Patrol Tactical Unit was started in 1984. The Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986 made it illegal to knowingly hire unauthorized immigrants. It also granted legal status to about 3 million undocumented immigrants. In 1994, the North American Free Trade Agreement established a stronger economic relationship between the United States, Mexico, and Canada.
Think about it. Now that you know the complex history between the United States and Mexico, do you think that these relationships have affected the types of barriers migrant Mexicans may face when attempting to attain U.S. citizenship?
Do you ever wonder why there are so many undocumented people within the United States? Do you ever think it has anything to do with the citizenship process? Are you aware of what the citizenship process even is? In order for an undocumented immigrant to become a U.S. citizen, there are two direct paths that an illegal immigrant can take if they wish to apply for temporary residency in the United States. The first step is through family ties. In order to apply for a green card, you must be directly related to a U.S. citizen. U.S. immigration laws allows your relative to petition for you to be able to live in the U.S. The second step is through a permanent job offering. The employer will need to get a labor certification and fill out the I-140, the immigration petition for allied worker document, and prove that the illegal immigrant is very talented or has extraordinary skills and considered the best person for the job over everyone else that has applied. If you do not fall under any of these categories, then you cannot apply for a green card and proceed to gain legal status in the United States. However, if you do fall under any of these categories, then you can then apply to become a U.S. citizen in one of the following 4 ways. If you are a green card holder for more than 5 years, marry a U.S. citizen and carry a green card for more than 3 years, join the military, or have citizenship through your parents. Even if a green card holder meets one of the following requirements, there is still a chance that their application could be denied and they will not be able to achieve legal status in the United States. The process to become a U.S. citizen is very long and can take anywhere between 10 to 15 years. The issue presented here is the long time commitment it takes in order to become a United States citizen, and the harsh realization that these enforced requirements is the main reason why there are so many illegal immigrants in the United States.
So you were born in Mexico. So could you tell us about your journey to the U.S.? So, who did you come with? Did you come alone, with family? Why did you come here? How was it that you came here?
Yeah, definitely. So in the early 2000s, especially in Mexico City, there weren't many jobs. And my family, my mother and father separated for their own reasons. My mother wanted to give us a better life, so she decided to come to the U.S. My uncle had already been here a couple of years, and he already had a job ready for her. So a lot of people ask why Michigan? And that was the main reason. My uncle was already here, so she didn't really have to look for anything new, right? So when we came to the U.S., we crossed undocumented, as many others say, illegally. We drove for a couple hours. We walked in the desert for a couple hours, and then I got in a semi, and then from Texas all the way to Michigan, I was in a semi pretty much, and then I got dropped off literally right where I live. But I mean, the journey's kind of long. When I first got to the border, we were actually robbed by our own people. Right. So that was the initial start of my journey, already getting robbed in my own country. So that's how I remember my country. When I left, I got robbed from my own place, and it kind of shows you how difficult it is to live there during those times, right? People were robbing each other, and it wasn't even necessarily for good reasons, right? So then after that, I remember we drove a little bit, came up to a fence. And it was pretty weird because we went under this fence, but we weren't really rushed. It was I'm not sure if it was an initial fence or what it was, but we weren't rushed, right? So we kept walking, and then the next fence, I remember all of a sudden we started running. We started running and we got to another fence. That's where we were supposed to be literally running down the fence, trying to open the thing and get up. And I remember I had a little thing of canicas, which is marbles that we used to play with. And it was in a little red Santa Claus bag, and it got stuck to the fence, and all my canicas fell. And I was trying to pick them up, but my mom and my brother were like, "Let's go! You're supposed to go. Just get under the fence." So I left all my canicas except for one, that I was able to put in my pocket, and then we kept running again. We eventually started slowing down, and it was kind of dark. And what I remember is we made it to this house, and when we got into this house, there was pretty much mattresses everywhere. We just laid down and waited there for an hour. an hour or two, and then a trailer came, like a big semi truck came, and we got into this like small compartment up in the top of the semi. It was my sister, my brother, my mom, and I, all in the top thing. And we were just driving for hours. It was dark, we couldn't see anything. We could definitely breathe. It wasn't difficult to breathe, but we were just coming up here.
So how old were you when you came here?
Yeah, when I came here, I was 7 years old, turning 8. It was in 1999. So initially, it was my mother. So this is all one person bedroom apartment, or 2 people in one apartment kind of thing. So there's only 1 bedroom, 1 living room, and a kitchen. It was my brother's wife, my brother, his son, my mother, my sister, my other brother, and me. So it was 7 people in this little small apartment, and everyone worked. So everyone put in a little bit for rent, right? So it wasn't a lot, because 7 people that worked, except for the little kid and me, pretty much it's going to be, an easy payment. When I was in 8th grade, my mother and I received an appointment to kind of like apply to become permanent residents. We did come in here undocumented. So my mother married an American citizen. He was also from Mexico, and he applied to sponsor us for permanent residency. And then we finally did get our our application or whatever. So when we went to the border, what I did was have a little test. They asked me what my body parts were. I had to answer in English. They pointed at something. They gave me directions, and this test was fairly easy to me. And since my mother came into the U.S. because during a certain year, I'm not too specific about the law that they gave her, but since she came in here during a specific year, she qualified for this new rule where they were asked to stay in their country to be pardoned for a maximum of 10 years before they can apply. So she was denied permanent residency, and because of this, she was asked to stay in her country for 10 years without coming back, or it would be federal prison pretty much, because she'd be breaking the rules, breaking the laws. And then after that, she can apply again. So this is going to be her 8th year. So we have 2 more years. It would be 2.5 to 3 years. It would be in 2016 where she can reapply again. And I want to become a American citizen just so I can help her sponsor, being sponsored by me. That'll make the process go faster.
Think about it. Now that you know about the lengthy process and the requirements necessary for legal citizenship, do you think this has any effect on the number of undocumented citizens within our country? What laws do you think are in place because of this number?
If a police officer stops a minor, what documentation is the minor supposed to show the police officer to prove that he or she is a U.S. citizen?
Again, reasonableness is the thing. If there's not a reason to ask, officers aren't going to ask.
Well, let me ask you this. There's a car driving. There's an adult driving it. There are minors in the back seat. Now, the law allows the children to be checked, right?
Well, Mr. Chairman, at a certain age, and I not recalling with the age, at a certain age.
No, there's no age. It just all the children can be checked and should be checked under the law and its regulations. What are the children supposed to show?
Mr. Chairman, if they don't have ID, they're not supposed to show anything. You're not required to have ID, unless you're a driver or, in Arizona, we allow parents to go down and get an Arizona ID at any age if a parent.
So you think under this law, children, to prevent themselves from being sent to a detention center or whatever, would have to carry some kind of ID?
Mr. Chairman, that's not accurate.
Well,
Mr. Chairman, there's a reasonableness again inferred.
I'm just going to submit for the record Section 3B, and it doesn't list any exceptions at all.
We must stand for our families and our communities. We are united against SB 1070, and come election time in November, we will be heard.
My Unitarian Universalist faith says we are all part of one human community, one human family, a part of one great love, and together we can change the systems that are criminalizing marginalizing our neighbors and our community and are putting us all at risk. It is time to stand together, united against fear, united against racism, united against racial profiling. We can win and we will win, and it doesn't matter what the Supreme Court does in June and the decision they make. We will win because we are on the right side of history, we are on the side of love, we are on the side of human rights and human dignity, and we will stand together.
Although there has been a lot of provisions to SB 1070, today, Section 2B is still alive and thriving. This section gives local police departments and counties across Arizona the liberty to ask suspects about their immigration status in discriminatory ways, and it also allows local police to detain immigrants without causation. And how exactly are police officials determining who to stop and not stop?
This attrition through enforcement scheme has been tried before at the city, county, and state level going back to 2006. What has come from these past attempts? The short answer, nothing good, unless your only goal is to make brown people move.
73% of Arizonans supported SB 1070.
And if Senate Bill 1070 was so popular, why did the sponsor get recalled out of his own legislative district?
If you were speeding down the highway and had your infant in a car seat, in the back seat, and you were pulled over and charged with speeding, should that infant get the ticket too?
Senate Bill 1070 puts that wall right between law enforcement and the Latino community, and particularly with women of domestic violence. Too fearful to go to police to ask for help because of fear of, one, being deported, and even worse, being separated from their kids. This is exactly why Governor Brewer denied the invitation. She can't justify the very bill that she signed.
We know they've come over here to take advantage of our natural resources, and the stories that they tell about finding a better life for themselves or their families, and religious persecution is really just an excuse to come and rape the land.
Legal European immigrants, do you have your documentation? Shoot! Roger, we got a couple fleeing. Got a couple illegal European immigrants fleeing. Halt! Stop!
They tried to get away. It's really a gray line whether we can shoot them in the back while they're running away.
Got a young boy fleeing. Please send, sir!
I felt discriminated upon. Yeah. All these other people can walk by, but since I'm white, I got stopped.
Made me feel pretty bad.
It's maybe the way you're dressed, your anything.
My skin color, how I looked. They could tell I was European.
Kind of sucks, huh?
Yeah.
You are here as immigrants from Australia?
That's right, yeah.
Okay, well, I understand you all stole the land from the Aboriginals in Australia as well, is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so we're going to have to detain you guys as well. We'll send you back to Europe. You know, it's whether it's stealing the land in the Americas or stealing the land in Australia, the Europeans, geez, what a brutal group of people. Slavery, genocide, bringing diseases with them, poisoning the rivers. Today's the first step. Step by step, we're trying to reverse things, turn it back around, get these folks back over to Europe, and start righting some of the wrongs of the past.
Think about it. Do you think these current regulations and laws can negatively impact the daily lives of undocumented individuals? Do you think families and communities can also be affected by these struggles?
I came here when I was 3 years old. I'm currently 16. Everyone else in my family that is here with me is legal. Everyone but me. I'm close to finishing high school, too close. It scares me to think what will happen once I graduate. I'm scared everyone around me will move forward with their lives and I'll just be stuck here. I'm losing hope. I love America. This is my home, but this is no way to live. I didn't choose to be here, they did. And now I'll have to deal with the consequences. I just want to go to college, study medicine, and save lives. Is that too much to ask for? I just want to belong here. I want to be an American citizen. Anonymous. I'm 24 years old. In 2 months, it will be 2 decades of living in this country legally. I am the youngest of 5 and came to the U.S. with my mother in 1993. We had nothing in Mexico, and the only way we were getting through was by my father, who was already in the U.S. sending us money. When we arrived 2 years later, my father got deported. My mother worked in the fields picking tomatoes, green peppers, and strawberries so we could eat. It was still not enough. My older brother and sister, who were only 12 and 13 years old when we came to the U.S., had to give up their education and help my mother work. I can't thank them enough for their sacrifice that led to the 3 youngest in my family to proudly graduate with a high school diploma. I have never felt like an American. To me, being an American means having freedom. Free to be whatever you work hard for and always having a fair shot, and not being held back by your race, gender, or sexuality. In my case, it's my illegal status that keeps me down, and I am unable to better my life. To ICE, I'm a criminal for being brought to this country when I was 5 years old. I have never been in trouble with any law enforcement, but have always feared that at any moment someone in my family can be separated and sent back to a country that doesn't feel like home. The U.S. is where we feel at home, but unfortunately, we don't yet have the freedom that most Americans take for granted. We are a family without a country, and have been for too long now. I have been married for 2 years to a U.S. citizen and have a beautiful 1-year-old, and have been relentlessly pursuing a medical career that is not coming without more struggles. Renee, Tampa, Florida. I was brought to the U.S. when I was 4, I believe. I was brought up here with only faint memories of the country I was born in. I grew up always hearing about aliens and illegal immigrants. At first, I thought they were talking about real aliens, which made me feel scared. It wasn't until I got into middle school that I started understanding it wasn't Martians they were talking about. It was me. I know how hard life can be, and truly what we fail to see is the other side of our debate. I can tell you, if I had a chance to be born here or be born in Mexico and then be brought over here, I would still choose the latter. So if I ever got citizenship, I would appreciate it and not flail it around like I deserve it. In every government action, there will be someone to suffer, but not taking action is when everyone suffers. For we cannot imagine how other people can cheat their way in, nor can we understand how other people can break away a family until we step into their shoes. No name given, California.
Think about it. The struggles that many undocumented people face are very real and prevalent. Being that most of the U.S. population is unaware of these struggles, what do you think are the feelings many have about the undocumented citizens within our country?
Yo soy Joaquin, perdido en un mundo de confusión. I am Joaquin, lost in a world of confusion, caught up in the whirl of a gringo society, confused by the rules, scorned by the attitudes, suppressed by manipulation, and destroyed by modern society.
Illegal aliens! Maui, you don't even have any film in that.
Maui don't have a brain in his damn head. He's an idiot. Racist pig.
Deport illegal aliens!
What an asshole. Just a stinking son of a bitch and asshole.
Illegal aliens! You know, this isn't
Racist.
funny. This really isn't funny. It's our country and our sovereignty. This has nothing to do with you now. It has something to do with losing our country. And we don't want to do that. And you people are destroying it.
Hey, where you from, man?
I'm an undocumented immigrant from Nigeria.
I'm an undocumented immigrant from Brazil.
I'm an undocumented immigrant from Germany.
From Mexico. From Peru.
From Brazil.
From Israel.
From Armenia. From Mexico.
There is an estimated 11.7 million undocumented immigrants living in the country as of 2013. The biggest and most troubling misconception about these people is that they leech off the country and don't pay taxes. They are pinned as lazy, cowardly people running away from their problems and freeloading off the hardworking American people.
Now, one of the points that people make against undocumented immigrants is, my God, they use all these services like if they are in a car accident and we got to actually treat them so they don't bleed to death. Oh, that's taking up our money, and their kids go to school. That takes up our taxpayer dollars. They're robbing us blind. Here's the only problem with that. They do pay taxes. And someone actually did an analysis of how much taxes that they pay on average. It's, of course, an estimate, but it's a fairly logical one. It's from the Institute for Taxation and Economic Policy, and they realized, hey, you know what? They pay sales tax like everybody else, because you have to. You know, you go into McDonald's, you go into a store, if there's a sales tax in that state, you're going to pay it. They don't ask you, hey, do you have papers? Oh, you don't have papers, then you don't have to pay the sales tax? No, of course, you pay the sales tax. How much is that? Well, based on their economic status, which they're not rich, on average, they would pay about $8.4 billion in sales tax. They'd pay $1.6 billion in property tax. Now, that's not very much because a lot of them don't own property. But based on, the few percent that would and the renters, et cetera, you get $1.6 billion in taxes that way. And then you've got $1.2 billion in personal income taxes they're paying. And so for a total of, actually, an estimate of $11.2 billion in taxes that undocumented immigrants pay to the United States. And by the way, if they have a job through a fake Social Security number, which happens often, they actually pay the payroll tax but never get it back. They can't collect on that Social Security or Medicare, but they do pay into it their whole lives. So a lot of times they pay taxes for which they never see any return. So in the end, is it a net positive, net negative? That's hard to tell because you don't know how much of the hospitals, the firemen, cops, teachers, et cetera, that they use up. But when you hear that they don't pay any taxes and that they leech off of us, that's actually not true. They pay a lot of taxes.
Although not many undocumented immigrants pay income taxes, those that do are never reimbursed for it. These immigrants pay property and sales taxes just like everyone else. So to say that they are freeloaders leeching off of the American people would be a lie and would do a disservice to these immigrants searching for justice and amnesty within this country.
As to who is coming into the United States, now I'm sure frequently you've thought about the place where you grew up. You think about that little town, you think to yourself, gosh, we had a terrible problem back in those days. A really awful problem. We didn't have any Mexicans in our town.
But let me make two arguments. Number one, I think there is an invasion of the United States going on. And we wouldn't have 12 million illegal aliens here if there wasn't an invasion. So number two, I'm using the military to stem the invasion. And I also include in that narcotics trafficking. I think there is an invasion from a foreign country, Mexico, into the United States. It's twofold, people and narcotics.
Another common misconception is that all the undocumented people within the United States are of Mexican descent. Of the 11.7 undocumented immigrants within the United States, around 56% of them are actually Mexican, making it very clear that although Mexicans make up the majority of undocumented people, they're not the only ones residing within this country. Think about it. Now that you know the actual facts about undocumented citizens within the United States, do you think that the misconceptions many have can affect the way the immigration policies are written? What are the policies being implemented today?
A part of comprehensive immigration reform efforts include educational reform for undocumented students. Part of this includes DACA, short for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. Deferred Action was passed in June 2012, and since then, there have been a number of cooperating institutions jumping on board for the cause. Their cooperation has come in the form of implementing in-state tuition for undocumented students residing in the state, as well as innovative ways to work hand in hand with students who have special circumstances.
Although this has been the case for several institutions in the country, there has also been a lot of pushback against reform for undocumented students, despite what data suggests in support of the legislation.
It is the right thing to do. Excuse me, sir. It's not time for questions, sir. Not while I'm speaking. Precisely because this is temporary, Congress needs to act. There's still time for Congress to pass the DREAM Act this year because these kids deserve to plan their lives in more than 2-year increments. And the answer to your question, sir, and the next time I'd prefer you let me finish my statements before you ask that question, is this is the right thing to do for the American people. Baby, I didn't ask for an argument. I'm answering your question. It is the right thing to do for the American people, and here's why. Here's the reason. Because these young people are going to make extraordinary contributions and are already making contributions to our society. I've got a young person who is serving in our military, protecting us and our freedom. The notion that in some ways we would treat them as expendable makes no sense. If there's a young person here who has grown up here and wants to contribute to this society, wants to maybe start a business that will create jobs for other folks who are looking for work, that's the right thing to do.
Whenever they see the sign, the famous sign that you see around San Diego of, the mother and the father, and they're pulling the little girl along, nobody looks at that little girl and thinks, what happens to her when she grows up?
On June 15, 2012, President Barack Obama announced that the U.S. Department of Homeland Security would not deport certain undocumented individuals who came to the U.S. as children and would provide them with temporary relief called deferred action. If you are eligible for deferred action, this relief will allow you to temporarily remain in the U.S. without danger of deportation or removal, and will allow you to apply for a work permit for the period during which you have deferred action status. Even though the requirements for deferred action look simple, there are still many questions that need answering. DACA is a great step toward immigration reform, but because of the stipulations of the program, the futures of many beneficiaries of DACA are still up in the air. Being that the program allows these individuals to remain in the country legally for only 2 years, what does this mean for the lives of those individuals after this time? What will be the fate of those who have invested time and money into an education that they were eligible for through DACA? Will they be able to capitalize off of their investments, or will this be overlooked?
Now that the basic information has been laid out, it is more possible for viewers to make an informed decision regarding their stance on immigration reform and perhaps take up their own more in-depth research on the issue to obtain a variety of perspectives. Additionally, it would be interesting to see the different dynamics and stories that other countries face or have faced in terms of migration with the United States. Thank you for your viewership.